have a really weird one, but it wasn't in the Americas. I was in Nigeria and we were going from the airport to our work site with some armed guards for safety. We always had 2 or 3 guards because we had a contract with the government over there. Anyways, we were going from the airport to the small dam on a delta outlet into the Gulf of Guinea. We end up making it halfway there until we get to this small river crossing. We have all our gear in a truck and personnel in 2 Range Rovers. The first Range Rover takes a splash into the river and bang, the tire is shredded. The driver of that Range Rover gets out and looks under the tire to see a board with nails sticking out of it. Then a white truck pulls up behind us and starts asking us questions about what happened and tries to help pull us out, so we look toward the guards who are shaking their heads like this is a stupid idea, but the guys from the white truck press harder. The guards have had enough and take the dudes from the white trucks out of ear's range, and the next thing we know, the guys throw us some money to buy a new tire and leave us as quickly as possible. Now I don't know what the guards said to the guys in the white truck, but it is Nigeria, so... Anyway, when we get back up and running, the guard in my Range Rover, I was driving because I'm awesome and off-roading and stuff, clues me in on what happened back there. It turns out there are gangs in Africa who do something simple and cheap to halt your vehicle or convoy. Some folks get a pass, but what we had looked expensive to them, so they had to try something. And then whatever they think they can do, they will, which includes everything from stealing your vehicle and leaving you dead/shooting you so that they don't have to worry about it, putting up a front and acting like they want to help you, and pull you out and then asking for money and not letting you unhook your vehicle until you pay. Scary as fuck. Pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No streetlights or anything, pitch black. No other trucks or cars at the stop. I turn off my lights, I switch the truck off, do the curtains, lock the truck from both sides, jump into bed, set my alarm and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling over from side to side for about 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summer temperatures, reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out the day ahead, and suddenly the passenger side door opens up slightly. Cabin light turns on. What the fuck? Now the truck is a fairly late model and is in pristine condition, so there's no question about door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there with the solid rod in my hand that we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all, just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B-double. After around 5 to 10 minutes of getting fucked around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up next morning, yawned, fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and FML, there's a cemetery next to the stop where I parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization. Grabbed my keys, fuck putting my shoes on, fuck my pants, switched the truck on and just got the hell out of there ASAP. My friend's dad was a trucker out of Perth, and this is the only story I've heard that's really given me the creeps. So he's driving back to Perth in a convoy with a mate of his, back to back, through the Nullarbor. If you know anything about the Aboriginal legend, the Nullarbor is where the ancestor spirits walk, and also prime Yowie country. They radio each other because they realize they need to rest up and decide to sleep through to dawn and make Perth in the morning. So they pull over in the middle of this vast nothingness, lock up and hunker down for the night. At some point in the blackness, my friend's dad wakes up with his intense feeling of being not just watched, but stared down. He's not a superstitious guy either, he's a proper no-nonsense countryman. He says he just had this gut feeling that something was out there and wanted him gone. He says he scrambles up to the cab and chucks his keys in and turns his lights on, and at that exact second in the middle of the night, his mate does the same. Both trucks roar into life and they take off down the highway without a word spoken between them. Later, his mate says he felt the same predatory state and fear for his life so hard that he'd have just gone too. I don't know how true it is, but it's a good story and pretty creepy. Two stories, maybe not winners, but creepy overnight parking for sure. I was really new to the business and had parked at a stop in Texas en route from one place to another. It was August. There was nothing unusual about this situation. I was in the middle of a parking lot with 70 odd other trucks. I woke up with the start 6 hours later to the truck shaking and rolling, hellacious noise all around, and a psychedelic light show blasting me from every direction. It was a severe thunderstorm that I had no idea was coming. Wind, pounding rain, thunder, and lightning to beat hell. Being in a truck during a storm is closer to being in a tent than in a house. I'd never experienced it before, and even though I grew up with this kind of severe weather, I lay there in this tossing, heaving sensory party going. I don't even know where I'd go right now to get safe if I had to. Hell, I don't even know how to find if this is severe or irregular or a tornado. I was really tired the next morning. Number 2. I parked for the night somewhere in southwest Michigan on the way to the Grand Rapids. Again, a truck stop full of trucks. Shut down and went to bed. I woke up looking at one of the cabin lights which was on. I think. Fell asleep with the lights on again, genius, and then freeze. The light I'm looking at only comes on if you deliberately turn it on, which I never did, or if the door is open. Just then I felt the slight roll of the cab that's telltale whenever someone is climbing up. I wish I had some heroic Rambo shit I could claim I did, but I can't. I yelled. Now, I can make myself heard in very loud environments pretty easily, and this was the dead of the quiet night, and I yelled, "Get out," loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs. There was a frenzied scrambling and the truck rocked some more. Then I hear a very small woman's voice. "I'm sorry, I got the wrong truck." Nothing from me for a second, and then, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just get the fuck out of here." Moral of that story, lock your doors. She was either a driver or a prostitute, and it doesn't matter because either way, she got the wrong truck. I have a trucker story from the extended family. An uncle used to drive a lot and he always came back with the most weirdest stories ever. While every family member knew his stories, there was one story he told and warned about, even to me when I was 6 or so. Moral of the story is to never stay during night in the desert alone. It seems once he drove to Chile, he had a contract and the way there was okay. I made the travel myself later in life and it's beautiful. Whenever he was done, he usually spent a few bucks on booze, but this time, due to a family gathering, he wanted to come back as soon as possible. So instead of drinking in some bar, he decided to sleep a bit at the Atacama Desert. Well, it's a desert, and he had parked way outside the road and a few miles before the next village. He sleeps and wakes up on someone singing. He is confused and thinks it's the radio, but the radio is not on. Then the singing stops and it sounds more like a scream of help. That's when he wants to get out and help, but he's still confused. He said he started the motor and the lights to see where and who was there. He also opened the window a little bit and yelled, asking what happened. It was nothing, and right when he decides to get out anyway, he catches a movement in the corner of where the lights end. It looked like a woman, but the face was pitch dark. He freaks out and drives away, non-stop until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story his face went pale. Even my grandmother commented how he was usually a very jolly guy, but whatever happened in the Atacama Desert freaked him totally out. Like most people here, this didn't happen to me. One of my good friends from middle school had a stepfather who was a truck driver for a good amount of time. He was a tough son of a bitch. I never saw him not look like he could kill someone, except one time when he told us why he stopped driving trucks. He was on a long trip from somewhere down in Texas to Boise, Idaho. By the time he hit the freeway close to Boise, he had already been up for 24 hours. Either way, I don't believe he could have seen this coming. Outside of Boise, he was driving late at night at the fastest legal speed when out of nowhere he sees someone sit straight up in the middle of the road. He didn't have enough time to even hit the brakes, not that it would have helped. She was decapitated on the spot. He later found out she was tweaked out. I don't think even if he wasn't sleep deprived, he would have seen her lying in the road. From what the police could gather, she walked out there, sat down, and eventually fell asleep on the road. No one knows who she was or how she got that far out. One of my trucker friends has a story about spending the night alone in a rural stop in the middle of a Maine winter. She had a bit of an uneasy feeling about the place but couldn't put her finger on anything and needed badly to rest, so she stayed. Perfect Stephen King setup, right? She's usually a very solid sleeper, but wakes up around 3 a.m. that night. She's not quite sure what woke her up until she notices that the cab is very slowly and gently rocking side to side. She can also hear an intermittent soft sort of rubbing sound that corresponds with the rocking. She was a seasoned trucker already at this point, but really wasn't sure what this was. All the ideas that came to mind ranged from the mundane but alarmingly unsavory to the outright paranormal. Terrified, she creeps up to look in the side rear mirror and sees what's out there. Turns out some moose like to lick the road salt off of semi-trucks. Not a trucker, but I drive a lot of miles in a company truck for my oil field company. I am on call 24/7, so I'm out at all hours. One night after a long day on a location in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which is rather remote and sparsely populated, I was driving back to the town where my shop is located. I got too sleepy to drive and decided to pull over and nap until the sun came up. So I pulled off to the 2-lane highway down a country road and parked on the side of that road. It's safer than pulling off on the shoulder of the highway and no headlights to bother you. This was and is common practice for me. I left my pickup running and turned the headlights off and leaned my seat back and fell asleep pretty quick, with the AC on low and the radio turned off. I slept pretty good for maybe about an hour, and then I guess I was having strange dreams, so I woke up, but just kept laying there because I was groggy. The wind was picking up and sort of shaking the truck with random strong gusts. Lots of wind in Oklahoma. Eventually I started to imagine I was hearing whispers or murmurs, but I attributed it to the wind and my sleepy state, or maybe the radio being still on but the volume low. I kept hearing it, so I sat up and turned the headlights back on to look around. The lights illuminated the dirt road to my side and in front of me. About 50 feet in front of my truck and extending down the road into the dark where my headlights faded out were maybe 20 coyotes all milling around and sniffing around in the gravel of the road, their eyes reflecting in the lights. Coyotes usually run from light and avoid humans and their noise at all costs. There was no fear in these coyotes, and I was sort of struck by how many there were all standing in the road. They all eventually moved off into the dark as a group. I wasn't really afraid as I was inside my truck, but my feeling was an uneasy one, so I got back on the highway and went home. Also not a trucker, but have a spooky story. About 3 or 4 years ago, my dad and I took a 25-hour journey from Southern California to McAllen, Texas. Mexis, as some call it. This was late November. Around 5 to 6 p.m., still plenty of light outside. This white car that appeared to be fresh off the lot, no numbers on the plate, just the dealership plates, starts pulling in front of us repeatedly and cutting us off amidst the freeway traffic. The windows were heavily tinted so you couldn't see who was inside. It was pretty irritating and they continued to do this, so we sped up and eventually lost them. It began growing dark outside and I was tired, and I fell asleep as my dad continued driving. At this point, the freeway was empty. We had passed the major cities in Texas, and there was nobody else on the road. I woke up at around 1:30 a.m. because I could feel our car alternately speeding the F up and slowing down. I sat up and rubbed my eyes and noticed we were alone on the freeway. Wait, holy shit, was that the same white car behind us? I look at my dad, who didn't say a word but continued driving very seriously. My dad's a very confident driver, macho man type of guy. We were going up to 110 miles per hour. This white car would match our speed, then quickly switch lanes and pull right in front of us over and over again. When we'd slow down, they'd slow down. When we sped up, so did they. This is some pretty scary shit when you're in the middle of nowhere in the middle of night. Obviously, I'm panicking. I was 19. Like, what's happening? Are we going to be okay? I don't know what they're going to try to do. It's like a game of cat and mouse, my dad says. I guess this has been going on for at least 30 minutes, so my dad decides to end this once and for all. He starts gunning it way fast, close to 117, 120 miles per hour, till they're out of sight, which works. He takes the closest exit, pulls off the road. We went under an underpass, and he switches off the lights, kills the engine, takes a gun out of his center console, gets out of his car and just stands there. My dad is a very calm, stoic man, ex-cop who never shows emotion. I was convinced we were both going to die, or I was going to be brutally kidnapped by the cartel or something. About 2 minutes later, slowly, I hear gravel beneath the wheels. My heart freezes and I see the white car, eerily slow, exit the freeway, turn the corner in the road towards us. The lights shine directly on us under the overpass, illuminating my dad firmly positioned, both hands on his gun, pointed directly at him. They just passed us, continued their slow drive down the road towards the gas station. We immediately turned the car around, went back to the freeway and booked the hell out of the gas pedal, and never saw them again. Had a similar situation many years ago. Not driving a semi, but I was up early pre-dawn driving from Calgary to Edmonton. It was a beautiful morning as the sun came up, but it was still at that dark dawn stage. I was alone on the highway until a big black truck came up behind me. He stayed with me, then started to play. He was so close on my bumper I could not see his license plate. I could see his empty gun rack and a cowboy hat pulled low over his brow. He pulled back and then crept up closer. He drove beside me for a while, past me, then would slow down ahead of me. He shot ahead and then slowed to a crawl until I caught up, then nearly stopped until I passed him and scooped behind me. I don't know how many miles this went on for. There was no way I could outrun him. I was trying to plan what I would do if he bumped me off the road into a pasture. I was pretty white-knuckled. Anyway, sometime later I saw some kind of convoy. There must have been maybe 40 army jeeps up ahead. I saw they had really long aerial thingies on the back of the jeeps, so I think they must have been able to talk to one another. I have no idea how these guys knew that the black truck was harassing me. They may have noticed me before I noticed them, as I was concentrating so hard on driving. I get closer and the black truck is on my tail. As I got to the last jeep, Buddy rolled down his window and motioned me to pass him. This was a double lane, so no problem. Then he, the Jeep, pulled out right behind me and the guy that he was following dropped back. Black truck was blocked. Jeep driver just pointed out his window, "Go," and I went for it. I floored it ahead while these guys basically held him off. Safe as in my mother's arms. Never saw that black asshole truck again. Whoever the Jeep guys were, thank you. My brother was a truck driver in the 90s and early 2000s. He just told me this story a few months ago. He was driving through Pennsylvania on the way back to New Jersey. He pulled over to the side of the road behind two other trailers. In the early morning, he heard someone bang on his right door. Quickly jumps from the sleeping compartment and grabs his bat. As he looks out his window, there's no one there, but now there's a bang on the left side. Freaked out, he looks out that window and there's nothing but silence now. He's trying to figure out what the F is going on. Seconds later, banging on both doors simultaneously. He said the banging was so loud and heavy the truck was shaking. Both curtains open and he can see there's no one out there. He quickly jumps in the driver's seat and starts the truck, and he sees the two other trucks ahead of him do the same. He said he felt as if they all experienced the same thing. I used to drive trucks in northern Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast you can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. This road is quite flat and straight in stretches. Of course, this is deep in the bush. One day I saw something cross the road in the distance, very large, easily past the hood on my truck, but not long like a moose or elk, just tall. It disappeared into the bush, and as I drove by the spot, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard days later a tow truck describing on the radio his encounter with a similar creature, only he was much more clear he had spotted Bigfoot. This guy went on to some length to explain he didn't want people to think he was crazy, but he was sure what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community, and he said the elders spoke of them as commonly the same way they spoke of the other animals. I don't know what I saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what the hell it was.